Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on creating jobs and investment in the Heartland. My name is Ed Meyer, and I'm the founder and managing director of Meyer Strategies, and I serve as a senior advisor with Business Forward, and I'm very proud to be partnering with them on these convention policy roundtables. During the Obama administration, I served at the State Department, and 4 years ago served with Hillary Clinton as the head of the policy outreach team on her campaign and led the pre-election transition team that sadly never transitioned. I'm very excited to be moderating this particular panel. I'd like to thank our host committee sponsors, Amazon, Charter Communications, Lyft, and Penny Pritzker for making today's panel possible. And as someone who is coming to you from the Heartland, from my home in Dallas, Texas, this is a topic that I'm especially excited to dive into. My friends and neighbors and fellow parents at my kids' schools are folks that are small business owners. They're waiters in local restaurants, teachers, entrepreneurs, and they're asking the kind of questions that we're going to tackle in this panel today. You know, they're people that want to make the most of what we have here in North Texas and want to compete and thrive and raise awesome kids that have more opportunities than we do as parents. But what we've seen, especially during this COVID crisis, are the great inequities and the disparities that are really just being revealed. COVID's not creating them, but they're really shining a glaring spotlight on these disparities. And so, these are things like the technology divide. There are issues like the need to skill up and train for new jobs, to invest in innovative ways in some of our place-based institutions like community colleges and incubation hubs, and really thinking about what does a basic social safety net look like and what should it look like for the future. These are all the kind of questions that we want to tackle in today's panel, and I can't think of a better group of people to be doing that. We have Penny Pritzker, the former U.S. Secretary of Commerce and currently the chairman of PSP Partners. We have Anthony Fox, another former cabinet secretary, former transportation secretary, and chief policy officer at Lyft. We have Jay Carney, the former White House press secretary and currently the senior vice president of global corporate affairs at Amazon. We have Stephanie Mitchko-Beal, the executive vice president and chief technology officer at Charter Communications. And finally, we have Jake Sullivan, who's the senior policy advisor at the Biden-Harris campaign. I'm going to start out by asking each panelist to spend a few minutes with some opening remarks before we dive into our question and answer period. And I want to start with Stephanie with Charter, because a lot of these challenges start with having strong and equitable network connectivity. And so, Stephanie, I'm going to kick it over to you for you to open us up on this panel. I think you may be on mute, Stephanie. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Stephanie Mitchko-Beal. I run technology at Charter Communications. And for those of you who don't know, Charter offers broadband, video, voice, and mobile services to over 30 million customers in 41 states, and we employ 95,000 people. So COVID was a very interesting time for us. During the crisis, connectivity powered by our infrastructure that was already in place really helped us help our customers keep their lives going, including some of the things you mentioned. People will mention to me, they're working from home using technology like we are here. Their kids are learning from home. They're going to virtual doctor visits. They're using technology to socialize and even get their groceries delivered. So since the crisis in late February, we saw peak demand on our network increase nearly 20% on what we call our downstream and about 32% on our upstream traffic. And our network continued to perform well, but we had to absorb almost a year's worth of projected growth and augmentation in just a few weeks on our network. So we were out there making sure that people can stay connected and have the type of capacity that they needed to operate in the COVID world where people changed the way they were working. So we believe connectivity is the game changer. It allows people to have access to the economy from anywhere. Connectivity is the driving force behind the future of work. It's fueling the creation of jobs. and giving businesses and families in the Heartland access to opportunities. And I'll just give a small example. In the Midwest hospital system, our Spectrum Enterprise division is working with the hospital to provide fiber-based connections so they could link their large city hospital to the more rural community-based hospitals and local physicians. And that's so that people cannot have to go to brick and mortar. Maybe they can't get there, but the technology is allowing them to participate. And whether it's monitoring newborns in one facility because the skilled provider is in another, or just connecting directly with patients, the hospital system is now on the cutting edge of telemedicine because of connectivity. And Charter is continuing to work on our network to make that possible. So we know that the most important thing broadband providers like us can do is to keep expanding our networks and connecting even more communities. And high-speed broadband access, getting it to more people, we empower them to find the opportunities that are coming and that we need to be innovative about for the 21st century, really regardless of where they live, whether it's a small town or an urban center. And that connectivity will drive economic growth and powers opportunity. We believe it'll lead to stronger and more accessible economy for lots of people. So that's what Charter's up to, and we're proud to be part of keeping America connected.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And next, I'd like to turn over to Secretary Fox. After you ensure connectivity, there's a mobility issue, and Secretary Fox has a lot of experience in that area as the former Transportation Secretary and now Chief Policy Advisor at Lyft. Anthony, how do you think about creating mobility, jobs, and investment in the Heartland?
Well, Ed, first of all, thank you, and thank Business Forward for having myself as well as Lyft and the rest of the panel here. We are obviously in a time when we're facing a quadruple whammy: economic upheaval connected to COVID, which is the second of the four things I want to touch on, as well as unrest related to racial justice in this country, and climate change, which has been a perennial issue for us for quite some time. Rideshare and other independent work opportunities are a key to the country as we grapple with growing unemployment and traditional hiring is slow to return. In the Midwest, in the Heartland, hundreds of thousands of people have chosen to drive with Lyft across the Heartland, and thousands more even in Milwaukee. But that just tells part of the story. Let me give you more color on the profile of our drivers. 54% of our drivers are people of color. So with so much social unrest in the country, we are directly connected to the cause of racial justice. We have 75% of our drivers are part-time. And so they do work in addition to other work they do in the economy. 92% of the drivers drive fewer than 20 hours a week. So with so much economic upheaval, as I've mentioned, flowing from the pandemic, we expect even more people to want to gravitate to this type of work. And we want to be at the forefront of making this work even more meaningful for folks. And then 34% of our riders do not own or lease a vehicle, and more than half of our riders own a vehicle but use that vehicle less because they have access to our platform. And at a time when we're dealing with continued rising greenhouse gas emissions, the fight for climate change continues, and we believe we can be part of the solution. In my time in public life, I took actions to improve transportation access and cared deeply about it. And so the overlay of the unrest in this country, I think, is a moment in which we all need to figure out how we can play a role in closing gaps in our economy. And economic dignity is very much part of that, which I know Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris both care deeply about. That's one of the reasons why we've continued to build on our partnerships at Lyft by launching Lyft Up. It's a comprehensive effort to expand transportation access to those who need it the most. COVID-19 has given us a strong reason to partner with 500 organizations across the country. And we know that among people in this country, transportation access is one of the biggest drivers of social and economic mobility. when millions of people lack access to basic things such as access to jobs and healthcare and education and food and each other, frankly, that tends to increase the divides we have in this country. So through Lift Up, we have partnered with these organizations, and in places like Chicago, where we've offered ride codes to Shy Gives Back to give needy families access to essential services, or with the St. Paul Public Schools, where we've issued ride credits to help underserved students gain access to computers and other materials necessary to achieve good socially distanced learning. In Cleveland, through a partnership with US Together Cleveland, Lyft has been able to provide immigrant and refugee clients free ride credits to meet with their case managers and medical appointments. And we're also partnering with United Way and Goodwill to donate rides to help job seekers get access to job training, interview preparation, and so forth. So we know that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted communities of color, and we're trying to do our best to provide access. And we recently announced partnerships with groups like the Urban League and the United Negro College Fund to provide access to 1.5 million donated and discounted rides over the next 5 years. So we very much feel that we are part of the solution and part of the ecosystem that will get the country back on track. I do want to mention California. I want to address the most recent news around flexible and independent work in California and spend a few moments explaining why we're fighting with and for our drivers, independence plus benefits. As I mentioned before, the vast majority of drivers do this work part-time. They do so for a variety of reasons, but they're overwhelmingly in favor of protecting their independence and flexibility. And in fact, we've recently done some national polling that indicates that 71% of drivers prefer the freedom of being an independent contractor over the benefits of employment, and 82% say they would rather be an independent contractor than an employee. Now, having said that, not many people understand what that flexibility means, but for so many of these drivers, it means the opportunity to be a parent, to take care of a sick relative, or someone who's elderly in their family. It means being able to work when, where, and how they want to work. And it's a lifeline for so many people. So in an economic moment such as this, we believe that that lifeline is more important, not less. And we are strongly in favor of working with elected leaders and other parties to ensure that we both protect this independence while also providing a stronger safety net underneath our drivers.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Next, I want to go to Secretary Pritzker. Penny, you have tremendous amount of experience both as the Secretary of Commerce under President Obama and in the private sector, putting your innovative investment ideas to work for the Heartland. So I'd like to kick it over to you next to talk a little bit about that, and welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ed, very much. It's such a great pleasure to be here with you today and with such great business leaders from across America. Business Forward is a stellar organization, and I got to experience that during my time as Secretary of Commerce. They were an incredible partner to our administration. From my vantage point as a business person who's built many businesses during my career, jobs and investment in the Heartland is a very important topic. So thank you for bringing us together to address this. The fact is that we must build a more inclusive economic growth in all parts of our country, and especially in places that this administration has left behind. Many of these places are in our Heartland, and where there already was so much pain being felt even before the COVID-19 crisis. Frankly, the Trump economic strategy has been not much more than cut and pray, and we have not had a cohesive vision. And their response to the virus has just been a colossal failure. And I've gotten the opportunity or the pain of seeing it up close and personal in my home state of Illinois, where we're just the damage that has been done to millions of people and communities across our country is just heartbreaking, and particularly across our state, right in the middle of the Heartland. That's why it's really important to me that we have Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House. I think that will bring competent and ethical leadership and create fundamentally more inclusive growth for more Americans. I have no doubt that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will provide greater certainty and stability to our economy, for our businesses, and for our workers. And as a business leader, certainty and stability are essential to making important investment decisions. As many of you know, I've long believed our nation needs a more comprehensive and long-term focused economic strategy. And I think that the plan that's being proffered by the Vice President and Kamala Harris does just that. It's a durable blueprint for long-term growth and investment that includes policies that'll help our workers thrive in the 21st century. It includes investing in proven tools for job creation, such as early stage R&D that'll create new innovations in industries right here in America, as well as support for manufacturing and investment in clean energy. I know we'll talk more about that during our conversation today, but I believe the Build Back Better plan, frankly, doubles down on policies that we know are proven to work. If you think about a Make It in America training strategy that invests in upskilling through historic support of community colleges, we know that investing in our community colleges has a huge payback. We also know that whether it's spending in US manufactured products or in clean energy or digital technologies like electric vehicle technology, lightweight materials, 5G, quantum, and AI, they will all unleash high quality job creation in high value manufacturing and technologies. And finally, all of us in business know that we need transformational investment in our country's infrastructure and clean energy future. And the Build Back Better plan calls for that. Since I've been back in business and I've been back in Illinois and back in my home city of Chicago, I've been working on a number of economic development and upskilling initiatives and seen them at work. The first is working on more investment in our South and West sides, which are communities, Black and Brown communities that have long faced systemic discrimination and disinvestment. And we need to change that. We've also worked on giving 100,000 of Chicago's young people access to broadband through a new program called Chicago Connected. We suffer from the fact 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of our Chicago public school students do not have access to broadband at home. We've also been supporting innovative training programs for workers impacted by technology through a program called Skills for Chicagoland's Future. And finally, I chair an effort called P33, which is bringing the business community together to focus on how we make Chicago a tier 1 tech hub and keep our tech talent in our city and help them have opportunities in their backyard as opposed to needing to move to the coast in order to take advantage of all their training. So I look forward to talking about these and more of these efforts on our panel. And frankly, I also look forward to having rational and effective federal partner as a business leader. And so for the next 76 days, I plan to be working to do everything I can to make sure there's a Biden-Harris administration and make these goals a reality.
Thank you so much, Penny. And I look forward to diving in a little bit deeper on some of those innovative ideas later in our discussion this afternoon. Next, I'd like to welcome Jay Carney, who's the Senior Vice President of Global Corporate Affairs at Amazon. And Jay, I read this morning that there's hundreds of new jobs coming to North Texas from Amazon, so we're happy to see that. But love for you to talk about, from your perspective about equitable investments in the country and job creation. Over to you, Jay.
Ed, well, thank you. And thanks to the convention, to Business Forward for having us today. It's a great opportunity and to be part of a convention that is making history by necessity. Really quite extraordinary what we've seen the last 2 days, in unusual circumstances. So I've been at Amazon for 5.5 years. I left the Obama White House and joined Amazon about 8 months later. And one of the things that I want to say from the outset is that Amazon is a tech company, but the idea that tech is an industry is a mistake. We have employees in 46 of the 50 states. We have added 600,000 jobs in the U.S. in the last 10 years, the most of any company anywhere. And we've invested over $350 billion in the United States in the last 10 years. And we are, while technology undergirds what we do, we deal in physical goods. We move a lot of product around the country, and that requires a lot of employees and a lot of investment in infrastructure. And it means we have to be where our customers are, and our customers are everywhere. And that means investing not just in Silicon Valley or Seattle or New York, but around the country. 100,000 of those jobs that I mentioned have been in the Heartland, including Penny, you'll appreciate this, 23,000 full and part-time jobs in Illinois, 4,500 in Kansas, 13,000 in Indiana, 4,500 in Minnesota, 4,500 in Missouri, 23,500 in Ohio, 6,000 in Wisconsin, 3,000 in South Dakota. And the great thing about that is it allows us to find talent everywhere, because there is talent everywhere in the country. And while COVID has been an extraordinarily challenging situation for everyone around the country at multiple levels, it has allowed us to do two things. One, provide essential goods to our customers who need it more than ever, not just as a matter of convenience, but as a matter of their health and safety. But it's also because of the demand that created allowed us to add new jobs at a time when so many companies are having to shed jobs. We've hired an additional 175,000 people across the country just since COVID began. And we announced today another 3,500 corporate jobs, again, around the country, including in places like Detroit and other cities, very high paying and tech-related opportunities. We believe a lot in upskilling. We announced an initiative that we're going to spend $700 million over 10 years to upskill 100,000 Amazonians. And as part of that, for our lower skilled workers in our fulfillment centers, our warehouses around the country, we have a program called Career Choice where we prepay tuition, not after the fact, because money can be hard to come up with up front. We prepay 95% of tuition for our fulfillment center workers to learn new skills that pay better wages in nursing or commercial truck driving or avionics. And they do that through our partnership with community colleges around the country. And often that means we may lose them. They may learn a skill for a job that takes them outside of Amazon, but that's okay because we know it's a benefit that they really appreciate. When it comes to how we lift people up, I think we start with what we pay them. Senator Sanders talked the other night about the need to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Absolutely agree with that, not just wearing my hat as a former Obama-Biden administration official, but also as somebody who works for Amazon, where we raised our minimum wage to $15 an hour going on almost 2 years ago now. And I got a call of thanks from Senator Sanders when we did that. And what that means is that you enter our lowest paid job anywhere in the country, and you earn more at Amazon than 40 million Americans earn right now. And that's just disgraceful. We need to raise the minimum wage across the country. And and we need to create a system where benefits are more evenly available to workers. We provide the same benefits to our starting warehouse workers that I get as a senior executive at Amazon. That includes best in class parental leave and healthcare and the like. And I think that that creates a lot of job security and peace of mind for families across the country. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. Super excited for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and to hear about what the next administration is going to do.
That is a perfect lead in to Jake Sullivan. And Jay, I want to get back to you on some of that upskilling pieces later on in the conversation. But first, we're going to go to Jake. Jake's the senior policy advisor for the Biden-Harris campaign. Jake, you grew up in Minneapolis, where the Mississippi River flows through and where I-35 also runs through all the way down here to Dallas. So you definitely have your Heartland bona fides here to address this topic in addition to your policy expertise. talk to us about Joe Biden's plans for investing in job creation across the country.
Well, first, Ed, in the Heartland, we call it bona fides. We don't that Latin stuff. Thank you, and it's wonderful to be on a panel with former colleagues from the Obama-Biden administration talking about these very important issues. Each of the three previous speakers touched on themes that I think are incredibly important, starting with Secretary Fox's point that we really have to face up to the fact that we are confronting this quadruple whammy, as he put it, 4 crises all coming at us at once, all intertwined in various ways. Public health crisis, an economic crisis, a reckoning on racial justice and systemic racism, and the gathering impacts and accelerating effects of the climate crisis as well. And so any economic agenda, any effort to produce the kind of inclusive, sustainable growth that revives the middle class and this time brings everyone along, which is what Joe Biden's basic mission is if he's elected president, requires recognizing that these are intertwined crises and needs an agenda that can tackle all of them at once. So for starters, Joe Biden has laid out a comprehensive plan to turn the tide on this pandemic. Because until we do that, 1 in 5 small businesses is going to still have their doors shut a few months from now. Until we do that, millions of people are going to be out of work. Millions of people are going to be without health insurance. And our economy is not going to be able to get back on track. But then beyond that, it can't just be about going back to the way things were before. Penny referred to the Build Back Better agenda. And really what the vice president believes is that we have a real opportunity in dealing with these 4 crises to mobilize the largest public investment in research and development, in infrastructure, in manufacturing, and in education since the Second World War. And to do so in ways that really unleash entrepreneurship, job creation, small business formation, innovation, and to do so in all of America, in all parts of America. The first pillar of the Build Back Better agenda is very consciously styled, not just made in America, but made in all of America. Because the vice president recognizes that for too long, too much of the investment opportunity and too many of the venture capital dollars have gone to just a few cities in just a few states, and that it's time for the federal government really to recognize that it has got to provide a foundation for growth everywhere. That means major investments across the board in a modern, sustainable infrastructure that also helps us deal with climate. A mobilization of research and development dollars that we haven't seen in decades. In the 1960s, the federal government spent 2% of GDP on basic research and development. Today, we spend around 0.7%. And the cost of that in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship and the capacity to really drive effective job growth and growth of entirely new industries can be seen across the board, not just in the technology space, but in manufacturing and in a wide variety of industries in the United States. And I guess I would just add at the end here, because I think it'd be good to get to the Q&A, that the United States is a consumer-driven economy. Our entire economy only works if working people are earning a living wage with strong benefits, and that only works if we have genuine worker power in this country, an opportunity for every worker to be able to collectively bargain, to be able to have a voice in those wages and benefits, and to be able to stand up and say, I deserve a fair return for my hard work. And that's true across the board. And so the vice president marries these deep, abiding investments in the foundations of very powerful growth in this country with a deep, abiding commitment to workers in the United States that says, workers aren't just essential in times of crisis, they're essential at all times. And we can't just praise them, we have to pay them. And it's really the pairing of those two things put together that the vice president believes we can create the kind of dynamic, resilient economy that will sustain not just growth, but inclusive growth that reaches all Americans of all backgrounds in all parts of the country. Yes, including, and maybe with my bias, especially in the Heartland, in the years ahead. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Jake. And now we're going to get into a question and answer period. And I'm going to toss a few of these out to you all kind of one-on-one. I'm going to start with Stephanie. Stephanie, the impact of COVID on broadband and technology adoption is really pretty astounding. I mean, there are people that had never heard of all these online platforms that we're using these days. Instead, we'd be jumping on planes and meeting in person, and it just people and kids even are adopting technology in ways that is really accelerated. But what's also been accelerated is the technology gap, and folks that don't have broadband access, that don't have the same digital literacy. It's just really expanding all the existing inequity that we see in our country. Could you talk about this from your perspective and what you've seen there at Charter?
Sure. First, I just want to follow up on something Jake said about the workforce, because I really feel strongly about this in particular. We did give our frontline workers increase during the COVID time, and we are working to permanently increase their minimum wage from $15 to $20 an hour. At the same time, talking about technology, both adoption and what's happening in the world, but internally, we've had to pivot ourselves to use technology. We've hired over 4,500 employees since the crisis by using remote hiring, which was an internal change for our business. So we had to learn how to use technology ourselves when our candidates were not able to come to offices to get interviewed, and we've onboarded them and got them successfully working in the world of Zoom calls and media and all of these things. So I think there's a lot of work that was done to pivot not only the company, but then how we support our customers. So at Charter, we saw, increase in capacity on our network. We worked really hard to make sure we could make sure we could serve our customers, and we're still just committed to improving adoption and having commitment to low-cost broadband services in our footprint. So we have a couple of programs where we've had broadband service available to qualified low-income houses. That's industry leading, exceeds the FCC's definition of broadband, so that people could stay connected because they went home and they had, I think someone mentioned it earlier, kids working at home and other, more capacity in the home, not going out to a third-party location. We also think it's important to continue to fund philanthropic efforts to increase adoption with grants to provide computers and digital education and technology labs for thousands across the country. So the problem of the adoption of technology is a really comprehensive one and needs a comprehensive solution. So that's why, for us, we're just really committed to make sure access is there, because once access is there, all those other things seems to come along. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the most important thing broadband providers could do, like Charter, is that, to address this divide, is to keep expanding our networks and connect even more communities. There's 18.3 million Americans that don't have access to broadband, and to close the gap, rural development in particular is urgent and needed. So we're really focused on that. And, we've seen firsthand the change in our customers' behavior, how they use our networks, and really how we as organizations and operators and technologists have to change to support what's going on out there due to COVID. But, some of the things are not COVID related. They just become more apparent because of COVID. So, I also want to follow up on, I think we do need to be more innovative in the technology space. There are tools out there. There are ways to get educated using technology that's readily available if you have connectivity. So innovation is really key. And I think, part of all of our success and our success with broadband, because that's where I kind of focus on the network, is going to come from innovative ways to both expand and adopt new technologies. So I would also like to see investment in some of the new technologies that can make this change.
Thanks. Thank you, Stephanie. And I want to bring you in on this. You talked about racial inequality and geographic inequities in your opening comments. who's being left out, and what do we need to do about that? I think you're on mute, Anthony.
Yeah, Ed, thanks. I think it's heartbreaking to read the stories of young people in both rural and urban America who are not able to distance learn because they don't have access to broadband. And it's an issue that needs a national focus, and working with state and local partners to solve that divide. But the fact that we may be passing on a further learning gap, through this COVID crisis is absolutely unforgivable. Beyond that, I want to focus a little bit on our transit systems. One of the things that may not be as clear to many people is that when you are poor, you have a lot of things that you can't choose. You can't choose to just stay home because you may have to work. You may not choose to be able to call in delivery for goods and groceries and things like that. You may have to go get those things. And so we still have access points as a result of this crisis that have gone away. Transit systems are facing terrible budget situations. Many of them have had to reduce service. And as a result of that, people still are stranded in their communities because they can't get connected. And that's where some of the partnerships I talked about earlier come into play. It's also where the service we provide just in general comes into play. I think as a result of COVID, we might see transit agencies and companies like ours working closer together to create opportunities to both serve the community more broadly, but also find unique ways to offload some of the burden on transit systems that they will feel coming out of this, to help them get on a better footing and continue to provide service.
Thanks, Anthony. Jay, what are your thoughts on the sort of expanding tech adoption across our country, while at the same time the expanding tech divide? It's really a difficult challenge.
Well, it is, Ed, and as Stephanie said, there are close to 20 million Americans without access to reliable broadband. And one of the cool things about working for a company like Amazon, which started as a bookstore, is that we try a lot of things. They don't always work, but sometimes they do, and if the market's there and customers like it. And we just recently got FCC approval for what we call Project Kuiper, which is we are going to launch over 3,000 low Earth orbit satellites, and their purpose is to provide low latency, high speed broadband access to rural communities. And we think that this will create enormous opportunities for folks in parts of the country who have been left behind because broadband is an incredibly expensive, generally speaking, investment, and therefore has focused on areas of concentrated populations, and rural folks have been left out. So we're excited to get this started. We got a bipartisan 5-0 vote. You don't get a lot of bipartisan anything in Washington these days, and we were glad to see that from the FCC. And we're gonna get started with that right away. I also think we at Amazon and everywhere, we need to remember that there is dynamic economic entrepreneurial energy everywhere across this country. And it's been great what we've seen in California and other sort of hotspots for tech, but it's a fallacy that I think still pertains to believe that those are the only places where you can find entrepreneurial energy in the tech space. We just released a study recently that listed the top 10 places with the most digital entrepreneurs per capita, and the top 10 states, and the top 10 states with the fastest growing number of digital entrepreneurs. And a lot of Heartland states represented in that. And guess which state topped the list in both cases? Not California, not
Texas,
New York, Iowa. So I think that's there's some great work going on, trying to redirect some investment dollars into Heartland states. But I think that kind of information is useful for those who want to find where the next great startup is going to be. And remember, startups, when they succeed, they hire a lot of people and they pay well.
So that's a great transition to the next topic I want to get into. And Penny, I want to go to you on this one. And clearly we need investments in technology and in broadband expansion. But it's really investing in people, which is going to make a big difference, and helping people adapt and adjust to the rapidly changing economy. And there's a lot of talk about the future of work out there, but I think of this as like the jobs are now. The future is now, and we've got to be skilling up. We've got to help cities and rural communities train their workers, and then also help retain them and help keep them in the heartland. Would love your thoughts on that. I know you talked about a little bit about some of the initiatives you've worked on, and would love to hear your perspective on skilling people.
Sure. Well, look, I think this is the economic issue of our time, and we have to do more to help Americans adapt and thrive, given the impact of technology, automation, globalization, in addition to the impact of the pandemic. And if you look back during the Great Recession, it took almost 7 years to recover the jobs loss. And so I'm not optimistic this time is going to be different, especially considering the job losses this time is around 3 times greater than it was in 2008. And the people that are most harmed are the same people who've been struggling in our economy for the past decade plus. Those who lack a post-secondary degree or skills that they need in order to be active in this economy. And so we need a massive culture change or systems change in how we support our workers. But the solutions are right in front of us. We need to put more investment in our community colleges. We need to create lifelong learning training accounts so people can invest in themselves. They know the skills that they need and want to have the jobs that they desire. We need to support the creation of millions more apprenticeships. We know apprenticeships work. We should auto-establish worker training tax credits, like an R&D tax credit. Why should I be able to invest in a machine and get to write it off, but I can't invest in my employees and write that off? And we need much better help for workers who've been displaced. The TAA program is decades old. It's based on trade, and frankly, there's more impact on worker displacement than just trade. And finally, I would say establishing portable benefits. We ought to pilot some of those programs, and maybe in with organizations like Lyft, where a part-time worker who lacks access to basic workplace benefits can, accumulate maybe across different jobs, or in this gig economy, the ability to sort of accumulate a full spectrum of benefits by accumulating, if you will, those benefits from various employers. So there's a lot that we can be doing. And I think that the time is now, and COVID makes it only that more imperative.
Jay, I'm going to go to you on this, because I liked what you said earlier on, that there's dynamic talent everywhere, I think you said, and Amazon has one of the, largest footprints, if not the largest, I don't know, in America. So you see a lot of talent in a lot of different cities in America. Talk a little bit more about what you see in your, the upskilling programs that you do, and what works, maybe what hasn't worked, but would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, I have to start with a reminder that we're not even the biggest retailer in America. Sometimes we're perceived to be bigger than we are. Walmart is twice our size, and we're only about 1% of retail in the U.S. So there's a perception of scale, and our scale is big, that sometimes exceeds what's reality. But we are big, and we are in many places for the reasons that I talked about earlier. And what we find is, unlike a lot of tech companies, because of the nature of our core businesses, we hire up and down the economic scale, is that, we see the very same problem that I think Penny has talked about, and Anthony, that there are a lot of folks, even when pre-COVID, when the unemployment rate was incredibly low, and, thanks largely to Obama, Biden, honestly, but, that you had people stagnating economically because they couldn't make that jump from the relatively low pay, in our case, $15 an hour, but, federal minimum wage is still way behind at $7.25, to develop skills, not the not for your degree skills, but the kind of skills that can jump you to $25, $35, $40 an hour, which is life-changing, honestly. And if we raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, that will put upward pressure on wages even more. So we've had a program called Career Choice where we offer that incentive to our fulfillment center workers to take classes that are run by the local community college, often in the actual warehouse with glass walls so that their colleagues can walk by and see, well, there's my colleague and friend taking a class to learn a new skill. Maybe I should do that too. And, we've seen, really positive uptake and responses. And that's just a piece of it. We also are investing a lot of money in upskilling other Amazon workers who want to go from non-tech jobs to tech jobs, who want to develop skills in cloud computing, for example. And again, that's an opportunity to dramatically improve your life circumstances if you can go from, say, $25 an hour to $45 or $50 an hour. That's a big deal. So I think that's where we need to target in a lot of public-private partnerships. The federal government and even state and local governments can't do this alone. We can bring a lot of expertise, what we've learned, and help in these kinds of partnerships. But to me, it's the key to closing the income inequality gap, the gap between incomes and wealth. We really need to tackle this problem.
Thanks, Jay. And Stephanie, quickly, how's Spectrum thinking about investing in its workers?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with a lot of the comments. Talent is everywhere. We can find it in our companies. We can train from inside and outside. We just have to make sure we're going to look for it. I see that all the time in technology. One of the things we do internally is we have a career advancement program called Broadband Apprenticeship. And this allows employees to enroll and gain in-depth knowledge about their job, the cable industry, the networking industry at no cost to them. We have classroom instruction, we have hands-on experience and training out in the field. So the graduates receive an industry-recognized broadband field technician certification, which is quite valuable, that they take with them through their careers. They could work for Charter, they can work with other telecommunication companies, and the training is really beneficial for them to move around within the 41 states even that we serve. So we have lots of programs internally, right? We're big, but you really have to have a very purposeful agenda about making sure you're training people to do the right things and take the fear. Since I'm a technologist, I like to take the fear out of technology. It's really not that hard. When people are training, I say you drop to the level of your training. I believe that there's a lot of smart people in our country, in our companies, that if they just had access to the right type of training, information, mentoring, and sponsorship, we could bring the workforce from where we are today to what is going to be necessary, I'll say in the future, but the future is now, to actually build our economy on the digital world.
Thank you. And I'd love to move now to the concept of modernizing economic development. So the Obama administration invested in a lot of innovative public-private partnerships to help modernize economic development in our country. And many of these were place-based investments, investing in programs in places where people could go in their towns. I want to go to Penny and then Anthony on this question. Then we're going to go to Jake to talk about sort of how to apply some of these lessons in a big economic package that a Biden administration might implement next year. But Penny, can you start us out by talking us through some of the Obama administration innovative plans around economic development?
Sure. What I learned is place-based cluster strategies work, and they can spur economic development. And I think the Biden-Harris team recognizes this. And so I think we should double down on some of these programs. The reality is the government can play a key role in a number of ways. First is convener, second is organizer, and third is a catalyst as a seed investor, especially in early stage in technologies or in helping bring an idea across the kind of market gap that exists sometimes when a technology's been created, but it can't get to market. And they often call that the valley of death. And government can play this catalytic role unlocking both innovation and data as public goods, if you will. And let me give you 3 examples. First is in the Manufacturing USA program, which was an effort to modernize our economic development and spur early stage technologies that helped in manufacturing and design. And there were 14 institutes that were created that were public-private partnerships, each with a distinct technology focus, but all worked around a common goal, which was to secure the future of manufacturing in the United States and to secure manufacturing innovation as well in our country. What was fascinating is the public investment was matched 3-to-1 by the private sector. It was focused on regional innovation strengths like 3D printing in Columbus or Youngstown, or lightweight materials in Detroit, or advanced robotics in Pittsburgh, or in Chicago. It was around digital manufacturing. And we should double down on this program. President Obama and Vice President Biden called for 50 of these institutes. So there's plenty of room for more. A second is competitions. We saw Race to the Top work in education, but it also works in regional innovation strategies like the I-6 Challenge Grant, where we awarded millions to capacity building grants to help entrepreneurs in diverse regions of the country be able to move their idea from to market, and supporting the creation and expansion of research commercialization centers and early stage seed capital funds. Finally, again, what Stephanie's been talking about and others, which is making a historic investment in digital infrastructure through broadband. And as we've talked about, you know, the under investment, and it's exciting to hear what Amazon is about to launch. And we know, we were well aware of the underinvestment or the underpenetration of broadband in rural America. I think what we're finding in this crisis, in this pandemic, is that there's an underinvestment in broadband access to the home in our inner cities. And certainly we see that in Chicago. We have 100,000 young people out of 370,000 in Chicago that do not have access to broadband at home.
Thank you, Penny. Anthony, what did you learn about modernizing economic development in the Obama administration and since then?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that a lot of what we were able to do in the administration, and no one knows this better than Penny Pritzker, but a lot of what we were able to do in the administration were really, sort of cobbled together using, existing resources and trying to do exemplar type projects through executive power because of gridlock. And if I might add editorially, as we're talking about building on the Biden-Harris ticket, we should also talk about making sure they have a Senate and a House that they can work with to try to drive some of these things home. But what I would say is that we did a pilot project called the Smart City Challenge at USDOT. And what's important about that is that we were focused on using technology as a way of reinventing cities and transportation systems. But I think significantly, and even more importantly today, we included an equity consideration into that criteria. And as a result, Columbus, Ohio, the city that won that challenge, another city in the Heartland, they're not only putting better technology in their transportation system, but they're doing things like solving their infant mortality problem by putting kiosks that connect people to doctor's appointments and transit trips into neighborhoods that have historically been underserved. And that would not have happened had we not put that criteria there. So in addition to framing the technology of the future, we have to envision that technology as equitable technology and be very serious as a government about making sure that's part of every single thing.
So thanks, Anthony. So Jake, you've talked about the need for the largest investment in our country since the New Deal in economic recovery. What has the Biden campaign learned from prior efforts, and how that package should be implemented next year?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad Penny raised a number of the key programs that have proven out in cities and communities across the country, and really need the kind of public investment that can allow us to replicate that kind of success in dozens of different communities in all 50 states across the United States. And so, the Vice President looks at examples like Youngstown's America Makes or Detroit's Lyft, each of which help start, or each of which help grow innovative new startups, commercialize cutting edge technologies, create thousands of good paying jobs. And the logic of having these hubs that can bring together the basic research and development with workforce training and education, with small and medium sized businesses, will mean that you can basically go from soup to nuts, from the inputs at the fundamental research end all the way through commercialization and that valley of death that Penny was talking about, to market. And along that entire chain, you're talking about jobs at every level in multiple different dimensions. You're talking about small businesses in substantial numbers being able to grow and expand. And you're talking about more innovations from more places, meaning stronger communities and more sustainable job creation. Economists for a long time looked at these place-based strategies and basically said, this is a mistake. You shouldn't do that. And what's been interesting to watch is that policy has actually beaten economics on this score. Actually doing these investments and proving them out has now made a number of key economists in the profession look and say, oh, wait, we were actually wrong. There is evidence coming in now that suggests these kinds of place-based investments can actually work in a meaningful way. And that's a big part of the foundation of what this core pillar of the Build Back Better agenda is all about.
Thanks, Jake. So we just have about just a couple of minutes left, so I want to do one last sort of round robin, going through everyone to get your quick answer and to wrap up your final thoughts. And the last question I really want to bring us to is the social safety net. The safety net in America doesn't look the same as it did 50 years ago, or really even 5 years ago for that matter. And we have to redefine what that means. So as you wrap up, and I'll ask you to stick to about 30 to 45 seconds, I would love to hear your quick take on what that new social safety net should look like. And I'll start with Jay.
Well, thank you, Ed. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jay Carney, sorry.
All right, Jake, sorry.
No problem, go for it.
Look, I think we might say the same thing. I think it begins with raising the minimum wage, and that speaks to something I think Anthony said earlier about the need to have the right Congress to get it passed, and obviously the right president to sign it. It's been too long, and that creates some breathing space for families really struggling. Then I think we need to expand on healthcare reform. The Affordable Care Act, when in spite of incredible obstacles, has done an incredible job of expanding the number of people with insurance coverage in this country. And I know Vice President Biden, if elected, plans to build on that to provide that added safety and security for Americans. And it's, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, was absolutely the right thing to pass when we passed it, and the best thing that we could get past the Congress when we did. But as many people have said, it doesn't mean we can't make it even better. And I know that Joe Biden plans to do that. I think those are key elements to creating some, relieving some pressure on Americans who are struggling right now.
Thanks, Jay. Stephanie, over to you.
Hi. So yeah, I think you hit on those. At Charter, we totally believe in making sure our employees have access to benefits, training, health insurance across the 41 states that we operate in. I think that's really important. The minimum wage, like I said, we're already raising that to $20 per hour. One of the things, just talking about how we move forward in infrastructure and network, is really just figuring out how to break down the barriers for broadband companies to actually get into rural areas like reducing, and this has happened a little bit in some of the broadband forward programs for communities where a broadband provider can come in and actually build out without unnecessary permitting requirements and other fees that are barriers. So I think it's really important to think of it from breaking down the existing barriers sometimes in a very good grassrootsy way to make sure that we can get services where we need them to go. And I'll end with just saying, someone said data. I think every one of our employees and our folks need to understand what data is, how it's managed, how they can get into data technology. It's actually the fuel that is going to make our engine run as an economy going forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anthony?
Thank you again for having us, and continue well wishes for the great rest of the convention. I would say this: the nature of work is changing, and we have to move with those changes. And as we're working to improve the existing model of employment, we should be working to ensure that we have a worker-centric type of model for people who are doing all sorts of work. I've talked about the fact that the vast majority of Lyft drivers are part-time. And what do you do with a workforce that wants to stay flexible, wants to be independent, doesn't want to be employed, but still needs and wants other benefits around that work that can be utilized for education, for healthcare, or for whatever. So I totally agree with what Penny and Jay have talked about. I think there's a world in which a portable benefits model can be extended to flexible workers. I think there's a world in which we can lay down arms on what the classification is and focus more on ensuring that whatever work someone's doing is meaningful and it pays well and the people are taken care of.
Thanks, Anthony. Penny, we're going to go to you for your concluding thoughts.
Well, thank you. I think we have to make capitalism work better for more Americans if our democratic and capitalist society is going to persevere. And I think some of the programs that have been talked about, whether it's raising the minimum wage, expanding affordable health care, better support for workers in transition, more training, broadband access. But I want to add a few others, which is I think we have to expand access to childcare, sick leave, and family medical leave. It's really critical. The other is we have to strengthen food assistance. We cannot continue to undermine the SNAP program and other essential food programs. We're seeing too many families really needing to resort to food depositories because they can't afford food. This is the United States of America. It's crazy. And finally, I think we have to support our state and local governments. They're fundamentally funding healthcare, education, police, fire, and our first responders. So these are just basics that I think we need to be doing as a country. Let me just end by saying that I am really grateful for your bringing us all together. And as a business leader, I fundamentally believe that Joe Biden will not only provide stable economic growth for our country, but also will be a good jobs president. And so I'm excited to be here today, and thank you for having me.
Amen. Couldn't agree more. Jake, over to you to bring us home.
Well, I think you've heard a number of really important inputs to what the safety net looks like in terms of wages, in terms of benefits, the critical things Penny just raised on childcare and paid leave, which, by the way, not only will help struggling families, but will free up millions of more people to join the labor force and power growth. But I would just close by saying this. The vice president believes strongly that the definition and the architecture of the new social safety net has to involve stakeholders from across our economy. But it certainly has to have a core place at the table for the labor movement. It was the labor movement who helped bring us the 40-hour work week and the minimum wage in the first place. And as we think about defining what the social safety net looks like going forward, union voices, workers' voices have got to be a central part of that, along with small businesses and those with long experience in creating jobs and power and growth in this country. And so I would just close by saying it's got to be a table that is truly inclusive to produce an outcome that's truly inclusive and sustainable.
Thanks, Jake. And thanks to all of you that joined us on the panel today. Really appreciate your time, and all of you that joined us from home. That concludes this program. Tune in for more policy roundtables tomorrow and enjoy the convention programming tonight. So thank you all.